Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show, Your Decision 2018. My special guest today is the District Attorney for the 18th Judicial District, who is running for Attorney General as the Republican nominee, George Brauchler. George, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man. This is great.
Hey, my pleasure. So, okay, tell me, why do you want to be Attorney General, given all the grief that I'm going to give you if you win?
Yeah, look, I think it's a fair question to ask any candidate who's running for office. The statewide office, though, this one in particular, I think is one that I can do great things for our state. And as a kid who grew up here in middle-class Lakewood and who hopes to encourage his 4 kids to want to stay here and raise their own kids here, this is maybe the best thing I can do right now to make my state great for them. And I'll tell you, the state I inherited from my parents maybe 4 decades ago, it's just very different than the one that I feel like I'm about to turn over to them. And as long as I have the ability to do something about that and make this more like the unique and awesome Colorado that I grew up in, I want to do it.
How has it changed?
Well, you know, I'd say back when I was a kid, we had ranchers and we had farmers and we had the plains and the western slope, and then we had Denver, which wasn't the big city that it is now, but it was the big city in Colorado. And I don't ever remember feeling the divide that exists between communities that exists right now. Increasingly, it feels like Denver and Boulder and maybe the rest of the metro area seem to be offset from the rest of the state. And one of the benefits of getting to run for statewide office is going around and meeting people in these communities who will tell you openly, we feel like we're a second Colorado. We feel like we're an afterthought. We feel like every decision that gets made in Denver starts with an analysis of how does this impact Denver. I don't remember it ever being like that when I grew up. This was a place that lured my parents here from the East Coast, coincidentally, after the first shooting at their apartment complex. So it's interesting I'd end up as a crime fighter. But that's what drove them out here. And this was a state back then where you could do and be anything you wanted to be. And we had a different sense of ourselves and community, it seems to me, than we do now.
So I'd be really interested, when you look at the AG's office, what does the AG's office need to do that the incumbent, Cynthia Kaufman, hasn't done to make the kind of difference you're talking about?
I think that's a great question, especially because I'm a supporter of Cynthia's. I supported her for her election. I think she's done some great things as AG. I'll tell you the big difference, though, is if you look around the state and see how we have changed just in terms of legalized marijuana and its impacts, the opioid crisis, the meth crisis that we thought we had put to bed in the mid to late 90s in the metro area, but as resurgent as ever on the western slope. And by the way, when I do this, I hope I'm pointing to the western slope. I don't know what direction. That could be Florida.
I'm going to tell you you are.
Okay, good. We'll take that as the west. What the AG's office can do with its $80 million budget, almost every penny of it is parked and spent right there at that Ralph Carr building, catty corner to the Capitol, is to, in my opinion, is to grow offices out in those areas. Have regional offices where you can have a task force, a prosecutor, some other assistant attorney general to do the good work of the state out there in the state. The problem with state government right now is that we subscribe to that same late 1800s model that we've had for all that time, where you have to be a horse and buggy ride away from the Gold Dome just in case the governor wants to chit-chat or you need to go give testimony at the legislature. It's 2018. Even years ago, when I was over in Tikrit, Iraq, I was still able to have at least broken, Skype conversations with my kids on their birthdays or my wife on our anniversary or any of the other big dates. It seems to me today we have disincentivized the rest of Colorado to play an active role in state government because we've pulled state government into the interior. As Attorney General, I think we ought to find a way to take those dollars, push them out into the community to help fight the crimes that are plaguing them.
So, I mean, right now, of course, you're a district attorney.
True.
And everybody in rural and urban Colorado is in a judicial district with a district attorney.
True.
So how do you think district attorney, I'd be interested if you've had conversations at all with any of the DAs in terms of the concept of having satellite offices for the Attorney General's office, especially given the fact that today, I mean, the way, and you referenced it, you can communicate certainly, whether it be by Skype, phone, cell phone, et cetera. Does having satellite offices and having that additional expense make a lot of sense? Or would it make more sense simply to get some of your people out when you're Attorney General, get more of them out in the field helping with specific cases?
Well, I think having them out in the field, it's either going to take one of two forms, right? You're either going to have them hop in the car and drive at 55 cents a government mile from Denver out to Montrose or Montezuma or wherever, or you're going to have regional offices out there with people who don't just show up from Denver to help prosecute and help enforce the laws, but are actually part of the community where those laws are being enforced. That's what's critical. That's what's great about our state system of 22 elected district attorneys, is these aren't people that come from Denver with a Denver mindset. They're people who grow up and live in those parts of the state, and they're able to exercise discretion based on the values of the communities that put them in office. I want to see that same approach here. What I want to make sure, though, that I'm clear on is I don't ever want to be in a position as Attorney General to supplant the district attorney's discretion. I want to support the district attorney's discretion. And what they seem to miss right now, and I know this from the many meetings we've had, and I was president of the District Attorney's Council a few years ago, so I've had these conversations. It's resources. You know, the poorer parts of the state don't lack the will, they don't lack the smarts and the trial ability. What they lack are the bodies, and they lack the resources to put together a task force to tackle the black market marijuana that's become professionalized since we passed Amendment 64, to tackle the opioid epidemic and the seemingly endless train of heroin that pours up over our southern border. They want to address it. They want to stop it. They don't have the dollars to do it. The state AG takes $80 million from all corners of the state. Why not push them back out there to do the good work?
Wouldn't it be better maybe to fund those offices at the level you're talking about they need, so you have full-time people living in the communities that are part of the district attorney's offices? As you know, in some cases, DAs in some of the districts that don't have significant funding, that are in the rural areas, often rely on other DAs from urban areas to help them with cases. And you know, I know how much cooperation there is among DAs, where a DA, I know cases when, like Stan Garnett was a DA in Boulder, you know, he was down in, you know, southern Colorado, his team helping with, you know, a murder case, things like that. But as opposed to having kind of dual jurisdictions or dual organizations, wouldn't it be better simply to fund those rural communities, those DA offices, so they can do the job themselves?
Yeah, I'm not, by the way, great question. I'm not convinced it has to be mutually exclusive, but remember, the funding mechanism for local district attorneys are their counties. And so they get hamstrung by the resources that are available to these poorer and increasingly poor jurisdictions. So maybe the question then is, should we take some state tax dollars and supplement the DAs in those jurisdictions? I think that's a novel idea and an important one to discuss. There's been a couple pieces of legislation in the last 2 cycles that have been offered. They've both been killed by the legislature. My concern with pushing more state money into local DA's offices is the legislature will rightly claim, if we're helping fund you, we now get to have oversight over the decisions you make. We get to ask you questions like, why do you think you need another DA? Why do you think you need a human trafficking unit? Why do you think you want to pursue the death penalty on this particular case? And it should not be the business of the elected district attorney in that jurisdiction to have to bend a knee to some legislator from Denver, Boulder, Arapahoe, or Douglas, where I live. They should be able to have the freedom to make decisions about the dollars they're given by the people that give it to them. That's probably the best answer I can give you on the funding piece. But I still think the state has tools that just aren't available to most. We don't have a grand jury in every judicial district. The AG has a state grand jury. In my jurisdiction, 1 million people, the biggest in the state by a ton, we have 2 grand juries. Those rural communities don't have the ability to have grand juries, in part because of numbers, dollars. How do you pull ranchers and farmers away? I mean, we've had trials. I've got Lincoln and Elbert County in my jurisdiction, which makes it the most diverse jurisdiction, probably between the Mississippi and the West Coast. We have had seasons, calving seasons, interfere with jury service. Man, when the calves are coming, you can't be sitting in the jury box doing justice. You got to be out there doing the calving piece. You don't get that in Denver and Boulder, right? I mean, so there are real dynamics that are at work that just don't play in the metro area. And I don't think that you can just have the AG either show up or give them money to answer that. I think it's got to be sort of a more symbiotic relationship. And it's just one that we don't have right now.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with George Brauchler in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. We're with George Brauchler, the DA in the 18th Judicial District, who is running for Attorney General for the state of Colorado on the Republican ticket. So let's hit a few topics real quick.
Sure. Lightning round?
Lightning round, that's it. That's subtle for shorten your answers.
Okay. I am an attorney.
I know. I still like you, George.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Human trafficking.
Heard of it.
Issue that very little coverage here in Colorado, I think, on the part of the population, very little recognition or belief that it happens here in Colorado. Talk a little bit about that, and what can we really do?
Well, it's real, and it's present here. There's some interesting factors that make the metro area particularly suited for human traffickers, and I can't tell you exactly why this happens, psychologically or socioeconomically, but cities that have major league franchises, that have U.S. interstate access, thriving economies, those tend to be places where you see more human trafficking activity. Now, we stood up the second human trafficking unit in the state of Colorado in part because Operation Cross Country, which takes place annually, and it is a joint federal, state, local law enforcement effort to rescue kids, and by the way, boys and girls, not just girls, and even some adults, rescue them and hold the perps accountable, the human traffickers. We had the biggest number of those rescues years in a row, and it convinced me we needed to do something about it. Now, in part, I don't think it's because it's happening more here than it is in other places, as much as we have law enforcement that are fixated on trying to end this thing and rescue these people. So we stood them up, and we have been aggressive enough about it, and this got a little bit of press. There's a guy named Brock Franklin, who one of my prosecutors, who is the bomb, she convicted him at trial, and he got the biggest sentence in the history of the United States of America, that's our country, for human trafficking, 472 years in the Department of Corrections. And no matter what our current DOC does with parole, I don't think he's getting out.
Yeah, that's a fairly long term.
All right, it feels long.
So what about what can the public do in this regard? I know there's efforts to like train and educate truck drivers.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I think, I'm trying to remember now who was the sponsor of that bill, Williams, Herod, but that was an important piece of legislation to provide them with training so that as they go around from truck stop to truck stop on our roads and our highways, that they're able to get the information to the right people at the right time. I don't want to make this sound so trite as to see something, say something, but honest to God, it's kind of like see something, say something. We rely upon hotels. Here's something people don't appreciate. Backpage. You know, we've done a great thing in trying to shut down Backpage from using it for human trafficking, but here's the downside of that. Law enforcement had a great relationship with Backpage so that they were able to have the appropriate exchange of information to go out and not only catch the bad guys, and there are bad guys, but to hold them accountable and get the evidence they need. Well, when Backpage goes away and is no longer a vehicle for that, they're chased off into the dark. Right. And now we're trying to figure out where do we go next to try to find these kids, rescue them, and then hold the bad guys accountable. The bad guys are good at shifting ground on this. The other thing that's interesting about human trafficking is the guys that are involved in this, and there are women too, but the guys that are involved in this are our former drug dealers. And what they have figured out is there is a need and a demand for a product, but human trafficking is far safer than drugs because you can't get caught with a person on your person. And so they will separate them down the street or in some sort of an environment where if the police were to show up, they're far enough away, and there may even be someone involved with the scheme that is in between them physically. They can't get caught with coke, they can't get caught dumping something, and it's a self-replenishing resource, and it makes it kind of insidious. But in that particular way, we're discovering more and more about how to tackle the human trafficking part. I do think we need to invest a little bit of time and effort into a discussion about shame. And for those men and women who prey upon these kids and they become the consumers, I think we ought to embrace the idea that we ought to publicize this lasciviousness and what they do to these kids.
Let's jump to elder abuse. I know that's a topic you've had great concern with the aging of Colorado's population, with the growth of our population, and really the skyrocketing numbers of the 55 and older, and especially folks more in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. I am just stunned at what people do to take advantage of the elderly, where they're literally taking all of their savings, putting them out on the street in terms of homes. What can we do about that, and what do you want to do as AG?
Well, I think the AG has a valuable role, not just as a leader in the area of coordination of resources, but encouraging those jurisdictions that have an elderly population, but maybe not the economic base to support its own elder abuse unit. That's what we have in my office, is an elder abuse unit, a senior prosecutor and senior investigator. That's all they do. And part of the reason that grew out of our office was Douglas County has and had the fastest growing elderly population, I think, in this country for a while. The other piece is state legislature a few years ago said every allegation of elder abuse, whether it's physical or financial, must be reported to the police, and then the police must report it to the DA's office. But then there was no requirement under the law for the DA's office to do anything. So you have offices out there around the state who lack the resources of the powerful 18th Judicial District, who are accumulating all these cases, and try as they might to do the right thing, and I'm convinced that they are, they don't have the pieces to attack it the way we do. I think the AG can step in and again provide resources and guidance to help make that a better process. Not to take over the DA's discretion, to supplement their ability to exercise that discretion. The other piece is we have to feel more comfortable telling law enforcement when we think our elderly population are being abused, not by strangers, by family members. And that's something that we see increasingly. It is the nephew, it is the grandson, it is the daughter in some cases. And it's not always physical abuse, it's the financial. And we need to feel more comfortable telling people who, out of sheer pride and out of love for their family members, don't want their victimization to become public. They don't want it to go to law enforcement. We have to do a better job of encouraging that information to get to the good guys so we can hold those people accountable.
In that vein, let's talk a little bit about consumer protection. And I actually was the first public member to be chairman of the Collection Agency Board in the Department of Law. And was assisted by an assistant or deputy attorney general.
Thus the title, assistant.
Yeah, there you go. And so one of the things I got to see from the inside were some of the activities at the AG's office, some of the activities the office does in order to protect consumers. But I'm absolutely stunned at a couple things. I love your comments, and I know we don't have a lot of time in this segment left, but number one, I'm amazed at the attitude of people that there's so many people out there willing to fleece, willing to really abuse others, willing to develop scams, et cetera. I'd be interested, just kind of your take on what thought processes are going on with people like that, who see this as a viable path in terms of generating income or revenue, number one. Number two, what can we do to protect consumers more, especially in this high-tech internet age where I'm amazed at the number of phone scams that are still successful, internet scams that are still successful. I'm still getting Nigerian bank requests. So talk about those two things, kind of just the mindset of people who do this, number one, that you've seen and that you've dealt with firsthand, and what can we do about this, I think, explosion in efforts to scam each other here in the United States?
Yeah, real quickly, it's funny you bring up the thing about the Nigerian thing. Maybe 2 years ago, my wife calls me and she goes, "Oh my gosh, some friends of ours are vacationing in Europe, and their wallet has been stolen and their passports, and they've emailed me to say that and I'm like, well, honey, are we the people you turn to through email if your world comes apart in Europe? Or are you like, quick, we got to get to an internet cafe and email the Brauchlers and figure out how to get rescued? And it was like, let me turn this over to my guys. And I have an economic crime unit that focuses on this kind of fraud as well. And there's really two kinds of things that are going on here. You talked about willing to do things to each other within our state or our community. A lot of this, as you know, takes place outside the country. Sure. And the advent of all the technology, all the internet access, the social media, the apps, all that stuff has made it easy for people who would not ever be able to set a foot in Colorado to be able to take people's money and use it for nefarious purposes. In fact, I'm sure my wife, when she sees this, will be very disappointed that her business just got scammed by someone who sent an email purportedly from her to her bookkeeper saying, this month, please deposit X number of dollars in this account. And that person just saw my wife's name and was like, okay, clicked on the link, deposited the money, and it was like, dude, that's not her. The ability to recover that is de minimis, right? Unless you have some special goofy insurance for I got hacked. The problem is you go to the bank's like, money's gone, you authorized it, it was all consensual. You're never going to find this person who may be in Africa or Russia or anywhere else in Europe or Canada, probably in Cleveland. No, I'm kidding, somewhere else. I think the problem that we have is the access is so great now to people. We're creating a generation of cynics. We have destroyed the trust. And when we talked about elder abuse, that's what makes them so vulnerable too, right? Is that they're a generation of people who did things over a handshake or face-to-face, and they can't imagine someone doing those two things and then stealing from them or hurting them. We're at a place now where you don't ever have to have the handshake or the face-to-face, and it can take place. The one that we see a ton of right now, especially in this housing market, are the landscapers and the construction people that show up and say, I'll fix your basement. I'll do your landscaping.
I'll pave your driveway.
I'll pave your driveway. I just need a deposit of $30,000 to get materials going and take care of these subcontractors, and we're off to the races. And they'll show up, and this is part of their plan, and they'll do just enough work, and then you'll never hear from them again. And the reason they do just enough work is when they finally get caught, and that's what we do, and we bring them into court, they go, oh, you know what? I'm just a bad businessman. I'm not really a fraudster. I'm not really a crook. But all they're doing is this little shell game where they go from person to person, victim to victim, collecting $30,000 at a time to drive around their Ferraris or to drive around their sweet rides and live in their nice homes, and they never complete the contract that they made with this person. I think the Attorney General has a great role here in educating the populace and in supporting all of these offices that are going out there trying to crush these guys that are doing it. On the licensing piece, that's something different. Now, you brought this up before, and I hate to talk through the rest of your show, but there's a balancing act there, right? One, we want a government that at least provides some protection and some framework for trust for people to engage in a business. But what we don't want to do is bubble wrap the consumer, right? We don't want to be in a situation where it's government saying, hey, car industry, you can't charge more than $300 for gap insurance, ever, under any circumstances. That's probably too much. But we do want to have some licensure for car dealers so that we don't have people saying, I paid for this online and I didn't get this and now they don't return my calls and what do I do about this car? Then the state has no ability to try to rectify that situation.
All right, we're going to take our last break. We'll be right back with George.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Because I've never done endorsements or commercials, people ask how are our programs funded, especially because we provide them as a public service to all our broadcast outlets. It's expensive to produce our show, whether we do them here in Denver or go to places such as Aspen, Washington, D.C., or even Iraq. The answer is we depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to help allow us to continue to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, just go to dmefd.org. The DMEF is a tax-exempt public charitable organization and has promised to dedicate 100% of every contribution to support our public affairs initiatives. If you believe, as I do, in the need for a forum which promotes civil discourse and mutually respectful discussion, I hope you'll decide to make a contribution today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbortv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm with George Brauchler, who is the Republican nominee for Attorney General here in Colorado. So, George, we were talking about a number of different issues that the AG's office deals with, and crime obviously is one arena. Though you're not, I mean, it's the DAs, the district attorneys, who prosecute crimes. The AG's office, however, does take the appeals cases, and so you see the AG's office in some of the high-level cases. I'd be interested in kind of your take on that role, and also because we've talked about crime, a big issue in the country is the fact that one of the most notorious gangs, MS-13, is now in 40 states, has over 10,000 members. And maybe let's start with this. What kind of gang problem do we have here in Colorado? And does MS-13 have much of a presence or not?
They're not the dominant gang for this particular area by any stretch. We have a growing gang issue here. And let me say one thing about the AG's office. While they don't tend to prosecute the vast majority of the local crimes, they're prosecuted by DAs, they do have some jurisdiction, both concurrent and original. They have special prosecution units, and one of the things that they do, and I think they do relatively well, is to be part of these task forces, even in the metro area, where they work with local DA's offices, feds, local agencies to tackle things like narcotics, human trafficking, and the gang part spills into both of those things. I think what people need to know about gangs in Colorado is they have an increasing membership of youth. And part of that is as we begin to change how we do juvenile justice in this state, those guys figure it out too. So in Aurora, for instance, I speak to burglary detectives all the time who say, we are popping the same kids multiple times in a very short period of time for committing residential burglaries. And the reason that they're doing that is they're being recruited by gangs to do it. And two, once they get hooked up, they're not being held in custody. And even if they end up being adjudicated, and that's the term we use for a conviction in the juvenile justice system, they don't get placed outside the home. They get returned right back to the community that generated sort of this burglary. That's one of the problems that we have. I think the other part of this is there's an increasing effort to organize between some gangs to do things like steal guns. Last summer, we had, oh my gosh, half a dozen or more gun shops get burglarized for the purposes of taking AR-15s, other assault rifles. These are things that help them do the business that they want to do. And it's not always to use those weapons, although that's our greatest concern. Sometimes it's to sell them to other people we don't have any control over. And what's very interesting to me is that in the era of legalized recreational marijuana, and I don't know if you know that we did that, Aaron, but we legalized marijuana here in Colorado.
I heard that.
Yeah, walking in today, I thought I smelled some. Not here though, it was
outside
the building. It was outside the building.
Oh, we have good ventilation.
Yeah, that's right. Is that we have, by hand, gone through since 2012 when we passed 64, Amendment 64, and identified 11 first-degree murder cases that are related to the illegal transaction of marijuana. Violent crime should not be growing because of legalized marijuana, but that's what we've seen in our jurisdiction.
All right. George, thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
We'll continue the conversation because this is just part one of our two-part special series with George Brauchler. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. and thanks for watching.